Yo, happy Friday, Judah Hoover. What's up, man?
Hello. How is everybody out there in Facebook land? As you can tell, I am coming to you remote today. I'm actually, yeah. So I'm showing 3 sets of clients, 7 different houses. I'm selling property management services. I'm selling some of my listings, and I'm also being a buyer's agent, and I'm also walking a property. By the way, Josh, I got to talk to you about this deal. I'm walking a property with a guy. It's a $219,000 purchase. I think we're going to put about $50,000 into it and then refinance it. It's a commercial residential mix. I think the guy is going to need some hard money, obviously, to take that whole thing down. And we'll have to talk about that. So I apologize that I'm not coming to you from a studio, and this looks like a less professional look today. But this is the Build and Grow with Real Estate show. My name is Judah Hoover. This handsome mug over here is Josh Weidman, who has again decided to hat it up today.
Listen, man, it's Labor Day weekend. I'm starting the day early. I got my hat on. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go sit by the pool this afternoon. Maybe do some batting practice with my son. I'm loving it.
Nice. So this is show 103, and we do content Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have a guest. How about our guest yesterday, Josh? Isn't Greg Swan amazing?
If you could bottle up that energy, you could get rid of like all the stimulants, legal and illegal. And
he's like, I mean, I don't know, he's like 60. You know what I mean? And he's so wise and so smart. I mean, you have a man crush on Elon Musk, who I'm sure we'll be talking about later on today. Amazing.
In a while with no Musk news.
Musk news. I have an avowed man crush on Greg Swan. So today is our news wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, where we talk about the news of the day. And so let's jump right into it, Josh. What's our first story?
Today we pushed out all of the negative, and we just got good news. And strike that. We just have news. We're gonna, I'm sure, agree and disagree, but let's start with unemployment. New unemployment claims. So I learned something new. Prepping for this show. Did you know that there's a federal pandemic unemployment assistance program? And people that qualify for the pandemic unemployment assistance program are not counted in the unemployment numbers.
Interesting.
So, hey, new unemployment claims this week, 833,352 people filed for unemployment for the first time. Not a great number, much better than what we've been seeing. The first drop below 1 million was only like 955,000, right? I mean, like It was just right below. This is 180, 170, 167,000 below that number. So that's pretty good. But there was an additional. So if you are a freelancer, part-time worker, or kind of fall out of outside of the normal unemployment or employment, category, you can file for this federal pandemic unemployment assistance. This week there was about 760,000 filings, so that puts us up over 1.5 million people that need some assistance here. Not great, but it is what it is.
Not great. It is what it is. We also, what's also cool is last week's number was adjusted downward. And dude, I mean, I was jumping up and down for joy when I saw what the unemployment rate is. So the unemployment comes out on the first Friday of every month. And it is, the government will later adjust this number a little bit, but the initial reading is super strong. We're at 9.7.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
And here's the thing, just for context, here's what I think is a little bit interesting. I mean, I would have to go back and check my numbers, but like during the awful bad, Obama economy that all the conservatives and right wingers were complaining about, I think that the unemployment rate reached 9% at one point.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, I'm close enough that the details don't matter on that. The spirit of that reporting is accurate. And so it's funny how we're celebrating coming down to what a decade ago was like the peak of the worst.
Yeah, exactly. All right. unemployment's behind us. Hopefully, sunshine and rainbows moving forward here. One thing that you can see in this graph to the right, it's pretty not pretty. We've been reporting these unemployment numbers every week for the last couple weeks. But if you look over here at the pandemic unemployment assistance program, you see that we got pretty much double what we're talking about, and maybe not double, but at least 50% more. All right, we'll see how things pan out. Unfortunately, that's all we can do. All right, the big story for today is that on Tuesday, September 1st, the CDC issued an eviction moratorium, which affects more than 40 million people in rental properties, the people that are renting properties. It was issued on Tuesday and it extends through December 31st. Judah has some news on this, but we wanted to do a story today specifically digging into really what this means, how it affects people, who it affects, all that kind of stuff. So let's get started here. So,
I know how it affected me. This whipsaw back and forth. I was on all last week. I was preparing to file for evictions and getting my paperwork ready and everything like that. And I had 85 evictions ready to be filed, which sounds like a lot, but I managed 4,000 units across 4 states. So, a small percentage of a big number is still a big number. Right. And like on Monday, I'm ready to file. And then Tuesday we can't file, and then Wednesday we can file as long as there's certain things involved and all this other stuff, and we figure out what we have to do so that checks for filing and everything like that finally go out on Thursday. I was so far behind. At one point this week, I had 38 unreturned voicemails, over 100 emails, and 27 texts. That's how far behind nuts. I got because of all of this. Just really ate up my week trying to stay on top of this. So we think that this is the best and most accurate information, but obviously we're going to have to play this out and just see how the courts react and see what happens.
That's right. So all right. So what does the order do? Number one, it prohibits property owners from evicting tenants from any residential property because of non-payment of rent anywhere in the continental or non-continental U.S. All of its what are the doggone it? What the Puerto Rico
subsidiaries and territories,
everything. All right, until December 31st. It does not apply to evictions brought for other grounds like criminal behavior, like other breaches of the lease, smoking in the apartment, pets, looking.
I'm really interested to see how that works. I'm really interested to see how that's going to work because I can tell you that historically, it's very hard to evict for anything other than non-payment. And so I'm wondering whether it's very hard to evict for anything other than non-payment. In practicality, you've got to, as a landlord, have pictures and give them a chance to, fix it and have them flagrantly say, no, I'm not going to fix it or whatever before you can file for eviction and get somebody out because of damage they're doing or noise to the tenant or smoking in the unit or all those other breaches. It's very hard to get somebody out for them. So I don't know whether it's going to get even more hard for them or if judges are going to say, well, geez, this is the only way a landlord can get a bad tenant out. So I'm going to start hearing those with a softer ear. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Well, so that's true in some localities, but in others, it is so much easier to sue for possession as opposed to recovering back rents and all that stuff. I know.
I'm not talking about recovering back rent. I'm just talking about getting them out of the place.
I get it. I totally get that. What I'm saying is, I know in Philadelphia and even in Palmyra, there are certain things that, like the municipality, one of the reasons that they required landlords to start registering their property this year was, eventually I know that they want to do inspections and things like that. But for the time being, it's that they had tenants that would just let the grass grow. And they got one little strip in front of the property and, the grass is all matted down. It's like, just mow the grass, once. If they get too many violations or the cops are called because the kids are playing in the street or, more likely they're throwing a party at 3 a.m., But when things like that happen, if that happens more than 2 times a year at the same residence and it's a rental property, the landlord is actually required to evict. Like required. And in Philadelphia,
that's big stuff. So the cops getting called and other stuff like that. Like there's a lot that a tenant will usually do to break the lease without involving calling the police. But anyway, let's
so this is a big part of this, and I think is a big part of the story. It doesn't stop rents being due. It doesn't prevent landlords from continuing to assess late fees. So it's going to create a bigger problem. 40 million is going to be 50, 60 million by the time we're all said and done with this. All right. Yep. So who qualifies? That's the next question. Who qualifies for this? Any tenant who lives in any rental property in the United States, that's residential only, right? Second, tenants must certify. Now, listen to the language, and Judah and I are going to argue on this a little bit, but they must certify that he or she is not able to pay full rent due to substantial income loss and has attempted to obtain government assistance with rent based on the coronavirus pandemic, right? So the issue here is, what does certify mean? If they are from the way as I was looking at this, the way I heard this, it was from I don't know, it was from an attorney that wrote the article, right? But her take was they have to write a letter certifying that this is what happened.
Right.
But Judah has another take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you do not have if your mortgage is not federally backed, I do not believe that you are going to have as much of a hardship getting tenants out. I believe that mostly what the federal government is doing here, and most of what their purview is on FHA, VA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, USDA, those types of loans. I think that a lot of property owners have commercial mortgages, and I was surprised how few we actually had that were federally backed. The other thing is I think they have to show that hardship, and we're going to be going in front of district justices and ask that they actually show that hardship and show that they were denied unemployment or couldn't get unemployment or whatever else, because it's been our experience that there's been very few hardships in point in fact. Now, the problem is everyone finds that one example, you know what I mean, where and there certainly is examples out there where people have had financial hardships, but people have financial hardships for all kinds of reasons. The percentage of people experiencing financial hardships is not that much greater because of COVID. Let's put it that way.
Well, okay, so I can agree with you on the second part, but our next slide here is going to address the first part. Because this is issued by the CDC, so this is the really interesting part of this, right? This was issued by the Center for Disease Control. It was not issued by Fannie and Freddie. It wasn't anything else. It was specifically the only reason that they have the authority to do this is because they're doing this to prevent the spread of communicable diseases.
Well, that's the link between the excuse they're using. That's the excuse they're using.
Right. But with that being the preamble and that being like the foundation of the argument here, this applies to everybody, regardless of what kind of mortgage you have, who owns the property, all this and that. I mean, this is a real problem because, I mean, like, this is, I think, a huge government overreach. And like the Trump administration has done some things that I'm not thrilled with, but this falls into the category of like, son of a bitch. Excuse me. Like, that's one, excuse my French, but it's Friday. Anyway, I still think he's the best candidate running, but that aside. All right. The high level of homelessness that could be faced by these evictions is like another underlying factor. I think the second point there is really the most important factor. Who wants to see 40 million people thrown out on the street? I sure as heck don't.
Right. And I agree.
A solution is necessary, but man, I can't believe that the CDC is the one implementing this. It's crazy.
I politely disagree, and I have quantifiable data to say that a solution is not necessary, because I am not seeing a spike in the number of people that I would file for eviction on. The number of people I am filing for eviction on that I want to file for eviction on in this week is basically the number of people that I would have filed for eviction on over the past 3 months. It's just all condensed into 1 week. If anything, it's actually less. I was talking to one of our senior executives about this week. If anything, it's actually less because some people who you would have filed on in April and then they would have got caught up, and you would have filed again in May and then they would have got caught up. There's those kind of those repeat offenders. So really, we're actually below where we thought we could have or would have been when it comes to filing. I do not think that this is a problem when I actually look at my data set.
Well, okay. So then here's the flip side of this conversation. Do you think the numbers are inflated? And this is just a political point that, that right now it's the Trump administration that's taking advantage.
So here's what I would say. Here's the problem that you have. So I do this with real estate deals, right? Before you consider what the numbers say, you have to very carefully consider what the numbers don't say. And I could do a whole show on that. It's one of Dealmaker's number 12 rules, but that I got from a good friend of mine. Before you consider what numbers say, you have to very carefully consider what numbers don't say. So 40 million people are facing eviction. What does that mean? That how did they come up with the number of 40 million people? They're half a month behind. Well, geez, there's people all the time who are half a month behind. I wouldn't consider that facing eviction. They have less than 1 month in their bank account, and they're half a month behind. Well, that's how most tenants live their lives anyway. So I would want to know two things. Number one, what's the metrics they're using to come up with that number?
Yeah, that's
and number two, not just what's the metrics they're using to come up with that number, but then also how does that number historically relate? You know what I mean? Last year at this time, if we apply the same methodology, last year at this time was at 60 million. So I'm not saying I disagree with your numbers, Josh. I'm just saying I don't trust your numbers. Not that I distrust your numbers, but I don't know what they are.
Yeah, you know what? That's fair. That's a fair comment.
Let me use an analogy, Josh. Let me use an analogy.
Yeah.
So I love politics. Okay. And so whenever I see, and I'm not talking about conservative, Republican, whatever. Yeah, I know. So sometimes people will say 60% of Americans don't like Trump. Guess what? That's a meaningless statistic. Sometimes they'll say 60% of registered voters don't like Trump. Well, that's a more meaningful statistic, but it's also not meaningful. Tell me what percentage of registered voters that are likely voters like Trump, and you come up with who's a likely voter by like if they voted in 3 of the last 5 elections or 2 of the last 3 elections. I forget what it is. It doesn't matter what American citizens think. It doesn't matter what registered voters think. It matters what likely voters think, and it matters the metrics that they're coming up with likely voters, because and it's also like voted in the last 2 elections and also voted in this year's primary or something like that.
I'm giving you an assignment for next week. I need you to get some data from the multifamily housing industry and from the SFR industry and see if there's something across the country. Because you know what? In central Pennsylvania, I think we have an anomalous situation where we have a lot more solid blue collar employers that are not on the line of falling off and disappearing. And so those jobs have remained and been sustainable. I know you guys manage property all over the place, but if the core of your business is in central PA, you know what I mean? That may skew your numbers. And I'd love to see what it looks like across the country. All right. So back to this stuff. What does this look like for landlords? So for landlords, according in 2015, there was a survey done again, we're going back to statistics, but based on a 2015 survey, just under half of all rental properties across the country are owned by mom and pop landlords, people that owned 1, 2, 3, 10, 15 units, but are not these large companies. All right.
Right. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, so the big businesses, a lot of these big landlords that are either national companies or local companies with tons of units, They got bailed out. They have employees. They have, other metrics that allowed them to get.
They've got an accountant who they can say, "Hey, Bob, figure out how to get us applied for the PPP money and stay up for the next 3 days if you have to."
That's exactly right. They've got people to deal with this,
and they also have enough. They also have enough in their escrow account at the local bank that they can say to the local bank, "Hey, put my application at the top, or work on my application before you work on others, because you don't want me to go out of business, because then you lose, I could tell you my escrow account is millions of dollars, and I'm a very small, large player in this field."
Right. So, all right. What the biggest issue and the biggest thing that's missed here in this whole conversation is that these mom and pop, accounting for half of all rental properties in the country, roughly, have no backup. There's no backstop. There's no, there's no mortgage moratorium, especially, you mentioned earlier in the show that you were surprised how few of your clients actually had Fannie and Freddie backed loans. Well, if that's the case, then the federal government has no way to step in and say, "Hey, for these loans, you also have a holiday. You show me your business and your tenants were affected by this COVID stuff. You don't have to pay a mortgage till the end of the year." That would be an appropriate response. That would be, on the same level of what is happening with these rent moratoriums, but that's not happening. Right. So, what you end up with is that landlords, hey, we can continue to roll over these balances month over month over month. We can continue to get late fees, but we can't collect rent if the tenants refuse to pay and can show cause or financial hardship or whatever. And, you ever hear that joke? How do you know a tenant's lying?
Their lips are moving.
There you go. If that's the foundation of this conversation.
Meghan Trainor has a song about that. Your lips are moving. Your lips are moving.
But
your lips are moving, then you lie.
Right. You're think about that fact. It's true. It's not always true, but a lot of times that you run into that, right? And because of that, if all they have to do is certify that, hey, here's what's going on with me, I don't have the money to pay, blah, 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 and they're not paying rent, you can't kick them out. That's not a very good case for the landlord, right? All right. So here's the stick. You ready for this? Here's the stick. How will it be enforced? Unlike the last moratorium, where there was very little that the federal government could actually do, since this is issued by the CDC and it's a federal law, you can spend a year in prison for each offense individually with $100,000 fine. If somebody dies because of the eviction, the illegal eviction, it's $250,000. Organizations, everything doubles. Up to $200,000. I missed this. 2 years in jail, and if it results in death, $500,000 per occurrence. We're talking about serious penalties. That, one thing I was going to bring up before I got to this part of the article and thought would be a good point of conversation is, hey, look, you saw all the way all over Pennsylvania, you had these restaurants that were going to defy the government order. I don't know if
and still just open up anyway.
Right. They're just, you know what? Fine me. We're going to open up. And if it's enough of these individuals, enough of these businesses, the government can't do anything about it because there's enough in the numbers, but it never ended up happening. I thought for sure that's what would happen here with landlords. Landlords that they have to get their property back or they're going to lose it to the bank, are going to say, you know what? Screw it. I'm kicking these people out. They go to work. They go to work or leave the house. We're just changing the locks and putting their stuff out in the lawn. Well, with these kind of penalties, nobody's doing that.
Right.
And really, we're just kicking the can down the street. What the heck? All right. What happens when this expires? On January 1st, landlords will be able to file for eviction against, again, according to state laws. All arrears are due January 1st. So, hey, you couldn't afford your rent for the first half of the year, but I'm sure you'll have it January 1st. But then again, the moratorium might be extended. So we'll see. All right.
Hey, I have a question. Can I just go to the grocery store and start continue getting groceries
There's a
and
moratorium
and
on paying your bills.
I'll just pay it all back on January 1st.
I'm waiting for the moratorium on grocery bills, and they're doing it with electric and gas. I don't know if you saw this. In a lot of municipalities, you can't turn off utilities. Like
Utilities are backed by the government anyway. Utilities are basically like the post office. You know what I mean? Utilities are too big to fail and not going to go under. And yeah, I mean, it's.
But come on, so somebody's paying for it eventually anyway.
Right.
All right. What happens when this order? Yeah, we talked about that. Moving on. I thought this was a pretty cool piece of news that that's really time sensitive, or not time sensitive, time appropriate. Is Silicon Valley putting brokers out of business? Now, it hasn't happened yet, obviously.
We should have talked to Greg about this. We need to have Greg on again, maybe next week, because he's been tweaking the nose of iBuyers, and he more than anybody else is not worried about Silicon Valley putting real estate brokers out of business.
Well, I would agree with that right now, but this is the thing that I'm noticing, right? Okay, so in the last 10 years, $30 billion in Silicon Valley has been spent on what they're calling prop tech. It's the idea of like this intersection of property and technology and all this and that. And real estate brokers and agents, until very recently, like June, they've been really bad at tech. I mean, really bad. I see some of the technology that's been implemented into the brokerage world, and it looks like something that was built 15 years ago. And it's like the cutting edge. Now things have changed a little bit, but only 58% of brokerages have a digital strategy for their business. And especially in today's numbers, that's pretty awful. When the last 3 months you can't even show a property unless it's virtual. There have been innovators in different facets of the industry, like Hemlin and Eden were innovators in property management. Landis does rent owns. Again, they all through an algorithm that they developed that tells them if a tenant is going to be a good applicant for a mortgage in 3 years, they'll sell them a rent to own property, and like it's all based on tech. You got commercial appraisers. Bowery is streamlining the commercial appraiser business. I mean, that in and of itself, if you've ever had to get a commercial appraisal, like we underwrite in house, so we don't have to go out and get appraisals from third parties, and which gives us a big advantage. But I mean, I can't tell you the number of bridge loans I've done over the last 3 months, specifically because the appraisal process, it can take 90 days on some of these units. And
I have a loan that should have closed on one of my listings should have closed on the 18th of last month. Yeah. And still, and one of the biggest holdups still hasn't closed. I'm hoping to close it next week. Was the appraisal process. It's just a giant pain in the tuchus. Right.
And so the thought here is this: at this point in history, you look at a guy like Greg. Greg is a really experienced dude that built his business on relationships, and those relationships exploded into people trusting him and him having a huge basis of knowledge that no computer is going to replicate.
Right.
The question, though, is when you get technology beginning to be implemented more and more and more, and the Gregs of the world disappear from the industry because new people coming in are not going to have the same kind of experiences that he had.
Right.
You could very easily see on a 20-year timeline or even a 5 or 10-year timeline that there's only going to be a couple of those people, a couple of those really great brokers and agents that are out there really performing better than the tech. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's something to keep an eye on, right? All right, a little bit of COVID news. Johnson & Johnson signed a $1 billion, a $1 billion deal with the federal government to supply 100 million doses of their vaccine. On Thursday, they published an article about the effects of the vaccine on hamsters. Since we are so close to hamsters, this is really good news. Bottom line is they injected these hamsters 4 weeks later, they exposed them to COVID. And then the rodents, they lost less weight. They got less of the really severe diseases that are kind of the spin-offs of COVID. And their exposure to death was significantly less than
vaccines looking like it's working, and phase 3 trials begin in September, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The other big news story, we touched on it last Friday, and this is it for the day. If you notice, there's no Musk news today. I had to get this in and keep it to our time constraints. But Governor Wolf, again yesterday, for the second time in 2 weeks, he wants to make marijuana legalized for recreational use. As you can see, Wolf wants weed. And for fun this time.
Wolf wants weed. That's a really good headline, Josh. You should. Great slides today, Josh. By the way, I mean, great.
I'm up in my game.
We are taking this to a whole new level. Listen, I think it should be interesting to see what happens with recreational marijuana here in Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you liked this show.
Whoa. You just skimmed over the whole topic. I know you got to go, but we're gonna dig into this just a little bit.
Go right ahead.
Well, here's the big news here.
Yeah.
If you these politicians do such a good job of taking the hot button issues and taking the biggest advantage of them that they can. Guess what this recreational marijuana is going to be used for? The tax revenue only going to be used for offsetting the cost of COVID, and of course, righting some of the wrongs, implementing restorative justice programs that, give priority to repairing the harms done by the crime victims and communities as a result of drug criminalization. So basically, the government creates a problem by making this illegal, and they're going to fix it by taxing it and making it legal again.
So the government created the problem to begin with.
Right.
And now they're going to tax the solution to fix the problem that they created. That's on brand for the government. That is right on brand for the government.
If a private company did this, they would be so stinking rich. The federal government does this and they're broke. It's insane. All right. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for today's broadcast. We really appreciate it. It was a great week. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Kick back. Enjoy the sunshine. It's supposed to be a pretty nice weekend here. If you enjoyed the show today, don't forget to give us a like and a share. We got a lot of love here. Travis, Catherine, Jeff, Jeremy, Taz, Brandon, and Bayshore. Thanks a lot, guys. Give us some love. We'll see you on Tuesday. We're taking off on Monday. You take off too. Spend some time with your family.
See you, everybody.
All right, guys.